Yeah, if you guys weren't here this week, we had an amazing time. So much fun. Can we just real quick, I think Brooke may be in here, or she might be still out there in the kids' hallway. Can we just cheer for Brooke and her whole team that put that together this week, our kids' camp. So much fun. So many awesome things they were learning about God this week. Yeah, it was great. All right, so we are in this series called What is God Like? And the kind of through this series that we've been going through this summer, there's kind of been this quote that we've been using kind of this guide as we've been going through this. And it's from this guy named Tozer, because he's always dropping truth bombs. But he says this: what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. And for some of you, might like, are you sure? Is that what it is? But yeah, it really is, because it kind of shapes not only how we see ourselves, it shapes how we see the people around us. How we see God shapes everything. And oftentimes here in the West, we kind of have like these very exacting, specific words that we like to use to kind of describe God. And especially some of the ones that are like the omnipotent, omniscient. Some of those almost feel like clinical. They kind of feel like they're very kind of exacting and very specific words. And at least for a lot of these words, you see them, they kind of just feel like very like, oh, this is what it is. It doesn't have like a lot of feeling behind it. But in the ancient world, in ancient East, they kind of had like these bigger word pictures, this bigger imagery when they described God. Things that kind of had like more than one kind of just word that kind of had a lot of things to describe it. And so we've been going through each week of the series, just going through one of these different word pictures, these images of who God is. So today, I am going to be talking about how God is a shepherd. And the best way that I know how to talk about God being a shepherd is to go back to my freshman year in high school. So bear with me. My freshman year of high school, I had somehow been convinced that I wanted to run cross country. I didn't. But one of the very first things they did is they brought us, they called it team camp, and it wasn't really team camp. It was, we went to Turkey Run State Park and slept on the ground for like 5 days and had to run all day long. But because I was a freshman, I remember at one point we were kind of like all like hanging out, and the seniors were getting together. They said, hey, well, they didn't tell us this part, but they said, we're going to haze the freshmen. And so what their plan was is they were going to take us snipe hunting. Some of you already know where this is going. And so they start telling us about this weird bird that doesn't fly, that lives underground in these holes, and that if you are like really quiet at night and you come running up over a hill, they will get scared out of these holes, and then you have like a little bag, like your sleeping bag or any kind of bag, and you catch them. And it's so much fun. It's a great time. And I think I was at least kind of liked as a freshman, so they weren't even asking me to go snipe hunting. They had kind of the two of the more annoying guys they were trying to convince, and they were like, I don't think this is real. This feels a little suspect. And I was like, I love birds. I would be honored to go snipe hunting. And so I volunteered myself to then go snipe hunting. So they go, well, all right, we'll take it. So all the seniors, the whole group takes me up to this big, huge hill. And they say, all right, this is what we're going to do. You're just going to stand here with your sleeping bag, and you're just going to sit here. And then in a few minutes, we'll come running up the other side of the hill, and then they will just all come running out, and you're just going to catch every single one of these snipes. It's going to be a great time. And I said, all right, that sounds great. They left me there with no lights, no flashlights. They're just walking on down. And I sat there for, I'm not joking, maybe 5 minutes like this, ready to go, sleeping bag, ready to catch all these snipes coming up. And it took me about that long before I realized, oh, there's no snipes coming. There's no one coming back for me, is there? So then I finally, because this was, as the middle schoolers and high schoolers like to say, because I was born in the 1900s, I didn't have a cell phone at the time. I couldn't call anybody. I had no flashlight. And so I had to then try to make it down the hill by myself, completely pitch black in the middle of the night. And then on top of that, as I finally got down the hill, I had no clue where our camping spot was. I just remember just being lost. I think I was probably lost for around maybe a half an hour, enough to the point where then they all end up having to come back, because I think they're like, hey, we're going to get in trouble if Nico just gets lost in the woods for the rest of the night. But so then they were all around trying to find me, just calling, Nico, Nico, Nico. And then, I'll be honest, I got way more confused, because it would have made more sense to have us all in one group, but instead they were all surrounding me. So then I was was just really confused on where to go and what direction to go, right? All these different voices calling me. And I think if I'm honest, like most of the time in everyday life, we can kind of just trade those woods for just all the different voices that we're hearing all around us, right? Every day we are hearing voices around us. We have all these different voices calling us to different things. Sometimes it's that voice of achievement, right? Of like, oh man, I need to work harder. I need to do better. I should be farther along at this point in my life, whether it's for work, maybe it's for your hobbies, maybe it's some other goal that you're aiming for. Sometimes it's those voices of like politics, right? Of like, oh, we have to be on the right side or the wrong side, and there's only one side. And if we do this one thing, then everything's gonna go in the toilet. And there's all these different things going on. Sometimes it's that voice of fear that constantly is just speaking into us of like, man, but if you try this, you might fail. If you do this, it might not go the way that you want. Sometimes it's that voice of money and comfort of like, man, if I just had just a little bit more, if I just had a little bit more, everything would be a little bit better. Man, if I just got to go on like one more vacation a year, man, my life would be so much better, right? Sometimes it's that voice of shame that is sometimes just going like, man, if they just knew who you really were, if they knew some of the things that you thought, if they knew about your past, oh man, they would think about you so much differently. Sometimes it's even like that family expectations of those different things that maybe your family's put on you, maybe you've put on yourself, of just different things. You're like, man, I have to do this, or I have to be like this around my family. Right? There's so many different voices. That's just scratching the surface. And I think part of what makes some of these voices so hard to kind of like figure out and discern is that a lot of times there's kind of like a half truth in all of those, right? There's like a little bit, that voice is telling you a half truth as if it's like a whole truth. Like that, that achievement voice whispers something that's partially true, like work hard, grow, do your best, and like that's good, right? But then it kind of sneaks in that lie of like, because if you stop achieving, then you're nobody, right? That loudest voice in your life will eventually become the shepherd of your life. So the question I'm going to be asking you this morning, and the question we're going to be looking at this morning is, what voice are you following? What voice are you following? What voice is shepherding your life? And the question isn't whether you'll be led, it's who or what is going to lead you. Because we all need a shepherd, because the voices around us are always shaping the direction of our lives. So in the scriptures, we see constantly this image of God being like a shepherd. It's all throughout it. Here's just a few verses that kind of give us like a quick example of, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms, carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. The God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day. Like, we see it all throughout. But I don't know about you. Like, for me, my biggest question when I hear things like this is like, what is a shepherd? Because I don't know. When you think of a shepherd, like, what comes to your mind? Because I don't know about you guys, I don't know any shepherds, right? Like, I have like, if you tell me, like, you're a teacher, like, I have an idea of, like, what a teacher does. I have an idea of, like, if you work, in one of the plants, like, kind of like an idea of, like, what you're doing. I don't know a sheep guy. I should have just don't have a sheep guy. Maybe you do. And I think oftentimes like our knowledge about like what a sheep or what a shepherd does comes from like Christmas plays with like 6-year-olds carrying a pillow pretending like it's a sheep, right? We don't really know. And sometimes we think of like green pastures, cute little sheep, like a cute little kid. Go ahead, throw up that picture. Maybe we kind of picture something like this. That's what I picture most of the time when I think about a shepherd. But for the original audience who, we kind of was hearing about these metaphors for a shepherd, this was not just this cute little comforting image. This actually said a lot more about who God is. Because a shepherd, yes, would look much more like this. And there was quite a few things I actually learned about shepherds this week. A couple things. Maybe some of you already know this and you're shepherd experts. Maybe some of this is going to be new to you guys. First one is that shepherds lead from the front, which I thought was fascinating. I always in my mind just picture them kind of like yelling at the sheep, like, go, go, go. No, they led from the front. And this because that the sheep just knew to follow their voice. All they had to do is speak out and the sheep would come. Like even to the point where like, even if two different shepherds are in the same spot and they have all their sheep mixed together, all the shepherd has to do is call out his voice and the sheep will start to follow him. Like that level of following him. There's also, they have, a lot of times shepherds didn't just have sheep, they also had goats. And apparently goats are significantly different from sheep. They are like much more stubborn. They much more want to go their own way. They're kind of like that friend who says like, I'll catch up and then like disappears for like 20 minutes because they found something interesting, right? Like completely different. And so if you've ever been in church and you've ever thought like, man, church is awesome except for all the people, guess what? Shepherds completely understand. They get all of these things, right? They get all the challenges of trying to deal with all these different animals, right? So shepherds lead in all those different ways. Shepherds also protect. So they have that staff that oftentimes is sometimes it's used to kind of help sheep like when they get stuck or any of those different areas. But oftentimes it was used just to be able to protect the sheep from the different animals who maybe wanted to eat the sheep. And then shepherds also provide. So one of the biggest things I had never realized that I learned this week is I always pictured them in like green fields and just like, you know what, we're just gonna chill here for a while. We're gonna, live in this random green pasture for like a week and then we'll move on to the next area. That's not actually true. Like sometimes they had green pastures, but most of the time, at least during this time, they were in deserts like this. And so they would basically be in a spot that had just enough food for that day to provide, and then they had to move on to the next area. And so shepherds weren't just looking to just make their life easier, right? Their role was to help the sheep flourish. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to look at a passage in John 10 where Jesus talks about being the good shepherd. But before we get there, we need to rewind like 600 years. And I think when we're going to see what Jesus says, I think he's kind of responding specifically to a passage earlier in the Bible. And to kind of set the context for this passage, it's like 600 years before Jesus shows up, God's people, Israel, are in a mess, right? Their kings have failed them. Their religious leaders have failed them. The people who are supposed to help them, like know God, like to protect them, lead them towards life, have actually kind of done the exact opposite. So in the Bible, God often describes leaders as shepherds because their job is to care for their sheep, for their people, the way the shepherd cares for their sheep. But instead of caring for the flock, many of Israel's leaders at this time had just been caring about themselves. They were using their power for themselves instead of serving other people with it. And so God speaks to the prophet Ezekiel and he says this, I've seen what's happening. I'm not okay with it. Here we go. Chapter 34, verses 2 and 3. He says, woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, you clothe yourself with wool and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You can see, you can almost feel like the anger as Ezekiel is saying this. Like the anger, not because they kind of messed up a little bit, right? It's because they had just stopped caring about the people. They were just focused on feeding themselves. They weren't worried about anyone else. They weren't worried about everyone else. They just wanted to take care of them and their own people and power. And he continues and he goes on and he says, you have not strengthened the weak or healed the sick or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. We can again feel like he's like, you haven't helped people who are weak. You haven't helped people who are sick. You haven't helped people who are injured. Again, not because they just made a couple mistakes, because they were doing everything they could to just keep themselves in power, to take care of themselves and forget about everyone else. It's almost like they let the loudest voice for them be like their own personal power, their own achievement, and the comfort that they could have for themselves. The loudest voice in your life will eventually become the shepherd of your life. And maybe for some of you, kind of as a little side note, maybe you've experienced this before. Maybe for you, maybe it wasn't from a shepherd, maybe it was from a leader in your life. Someone who is maybe a boss or a parent or a coach or a pastor, someone who is supposed to have influence in your life, someone who's supposed to help build you up and help you grow and become the best version of yourself. And instead, they decided to use it for themselves, to manipulate you, to make themselves look better. Maybe they even did a good job at first, and then all of a sudden it slightly shifted, and then you don't even know them anymore in the same way. If that's happened to you, I'm so sorry from the bottom of my heart that has been your experience when it comes to shepherding, when it comes to your life and the way that you're processing through that. But I think this is why this passage matters so much, because God notices it. God doesn't just let it go, oh, yeah, like bad things are happening. No, like God says, I see you in this. This is what he says in Ezekiel 34:11. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. It's like he looks at this failed leadership and says, I'm not just going to send another king. I'm not just going to send another leader. Instead, he says, I'll go. I'm going to come and show up. He doesn't just distance himself from his people, but instead, in the hurting and the pain, God moves towards us. My daughter, who is like in first grade right now, or about to be a first grader, she loves playing with slime and glitter and all those things. And let me tell you, I despise all those things. And the amount of times that she runs up to me and says, Daddy, I want a hug, and she's just got glitter and slime on her hands, I'm like, no, thank you. Like, I think sometimes we feel like that's how God sees us in our mess, right? I'm like, please go wash your hands, and then I will give you all the hugs you want, right? No, God is like, no, even in the slime, even in the glitter, even in the mess of your life, I am with you. I want to go towards you. I want that relationship with you. And so it's with that context that we hear Jesus say this, that I am the good shepherd. It's almost like he was just responding back to that, going like, guess what? I said I was going to show up, and I did. I'm not like those other leaders who have come before me. I am the shepherd Ezekiel was talking about. I'm not like those leaders who have failed you in the past. And he continues and he says, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. And I think so often we use that word know too loosely. Like, even when we say that, like, some of you might even say, like, I know who Taylor Swift is. And some of you say that really excitedly. And some of you go like, I know who Taylor Swift is, right? Like, you've heard of this person, right? And maybe like, I don't know, maybe you read like a magazine article and you know some of her likes and dislikes, and that's what makes you feel like you know her. But that's not the kind of knowing that Jesus is talking about, right? Jesus doesn't just know your resume, right? Like, Jesus knows your fears. He knows your story. He knows the parts of you that nobody else sees, not even your best friends, not even your spouse. He knows you. Have you ever had someone who really knew you in that way? Someone who could just tell something was wrong before you even said a word? Like, that is shepherding. Have you ever had someone who just walked beside you instead of just telling you what to do in a scenario? Or had someone to refuse to give up on you when everyone else had? Or had somebody sacrifice their own comfort for your own good? Now just imagine someone who does all those things perfectly. That's exactly what Jesus is claiming when he says, I am the good shepherd. And for some of you, you might even be thinking, oh no, like, I don't want someone to know me that way. Like, you almost have like this either fear or this shame of like, man, that feels like a too close of a level of friendship. I don't want anyone to know me in that way. Well, there's this beautiful quote by Tim Keller, pastor and author. This is what he said. To be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved, well, a lot like being loved by God, right? Like, that is the kind of love that God has for you, that loves you as you are and isn't shamed. Isn't like, oh, well, if you just quit this one thing, then we can be friends again, right? Then we can be good. No, he's like, no, I love you even as you are right now. On the days that you feel at the best and the days that you feel unlovable. Jesus continues and he says, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Once again, the shepherd leads in the front, right? But Jesus isn't yelling from the front going like, hey, come on, catch up, right? Jesus is walking with us through life as the shepherd, through our grief, through our temptations, through betrayal, through death, through the highs of our life, and through the lows. Jesus in this moment is just completely redefining what leadership looks like. He's saying that leadership isn't sacrificing to kind of protect myself, to protect my own interests. No, it's sacrificing for the best of the people around me. Jesus protects people by sacrificing himself. Every other voice, every other shepherd that we see wants something from you. Jesus wants something for you. And then he continues and he says this, they too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. Every day, we have all these voices around us. Fear, success, politics, comparison, shame, comfort, achievement. Jesus says, my sheep listen to my voice. And it feels like so often all these other voices around us can get so loud, and they keep getting louder. It almost feels like, especially with our phones, it feels like they get louder and louder every single day. And Jesus doesn't shout louder. He just becomes more familiar the more we listen for his voice. And soon we start to know his voice. Like in the same way, like you can be in a group of people and you can hear your spouse's voice out of everyone. Or the same way like a baby recognizes their parent's voice. Or in the same way that I can't even tell you the amount of times I've been in Target and someone calls me and goes, hey, are you in Target right now? I think I just heard your laugh. And I'm like, yeah, I'm in Target. Right? Like you just start to begin to know that voice when you're listening for it. Jesus, our good shepherd, leads us to life. And it's not the life about how our culture describes it or how social media or politics, greed describe it. But instead, it's so much better than that. It's this life that our Creator intended for us. Not just surviving or behaving, right? It's like this real life, this abundant life, this wholeness, this relationship that we get to have with God, with Jesus. And maybe for some of you this morning, when you think of this, like you think like, man, like maybe your life has fallen short of where you've wanted it to be. Maybe it feels a little empty right now. Or maybe you feel like you're not as fulfilled as you wanted to be or as you thought you'd be at this point. Or maybe through this season that you're in right now. Maybe for you, like that's a sign that maybe you're just following the wrong voice right now. That maybe you even thought it was Jesus' voice. Maybe you thought it was God's voice and it's led you a different way. And so the question for us this morning isn't, is Jesus a shepherd? I think we're left with this. If Jesus is the good shepherd, am I actually following his voice? And it's not about getting everything right or having all the answers. Jesus simply says, my sheep know my voice. Pastor and author Henry Nouwen, I think, says it so much better than I could ever say it. He says the great movement of the spiritual life is from a deaf, non-hearing life to a life of listening. Like maybe for us, maturity isn't about becoming more impressive and making a bigger deal about ourselves. It's about becoming more attentive to not only God's voice, but to the people around us. And so I think there's kind of two things for us to do from this, two things that we can kind of take away. The first one, and this might be the hardest one, to be honest, is just to receive his voice, right? For some of us, it is so easy to kind of block out, to have all these other voices all around us all the time, and to kind of start following whichever one we just kind of want to in that moment, or whichever one just feels like, yeah, that kind of just works in this moment, right? Kind of just reacting to each of these things. Instead of doing the hard part of fully believing God when he says we are known and we are loved as we are right now. Like maybe for some of us, we need to start to change the tapes of like those different voices in our mind, right? For some of you, maybe like even it's as simple as like before I check social media in the morning and letting all those voices of comparison come in, I'm gonna kind of pause and make sure I do some quiet time. I'm gonna open my Bible app first and make sure I get like that before I have all these different things of comparison. Maybe for some of you, like you're like me, and like there's been times in my life where I've had to stop listening to certain music, certain musicians, because I could feel the way that it was kind of making me a less version of what I wanted myself to be, or making me angrier, or making me feel more prideful. Maybe for some of you, and again, this might just be me, but there are like certain movies, like I can't do scary movies. And if you're for scary movies, go for it. I'm not saying don't do it, but like for me, like every time I watch a scary movie, I can't then walk around my house at night and be like not scared the whole time, right? And so like for me, that's just one of those things that like, you know what? I don't need those voices in my mind. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna watch that. Or maybe for some of you, and I think this is one of the things that can shape our voices maybe more than most things in culture anymore, is like podcasts and influencers. And maybe you've even like, I've done the same thing before where I've started to listen to somebody, and maybe at first there was something that I really connected with, but then after I've been listening to them like week after week, all of a sudden I realized like, oh, there's something about me that I don't like, and it's kind of shaping, and it's kind of the root is this podcast or this influencer. Maybe there are some certain ones that you need to like, you know what, I'm just not gonna listen to this anymore. This isn't making me more loving. This isn't helping me believe how much I am loved by God. So first we need to receive his voice. And after we receive his voice, the second thing is just repeat his voice. Like the question for us is, who are you shepherding? Like who are you speaking life into? Like when people have a conversation with you, are they walking away feeling more loved, feeling known, feeling hopeful, or more like they just have to earn more of God's love? Or do they feel like they are already known and loved by our good shepherd? And I think for me, so often, it has been the people in my life who have helped shepherd me that have repeated his voice to me, that feel like it sticks more than anything else, right? The amount of times I've been in a small group with, other people, and then they say, like, just through conversation, I'm like, oh man, I can hear and believe so much about who I am because of the things that these people are sharing with me. Or sometimes it's just people like, I remember I had this youth pastor named Tony that I still don't know to this day why he started hanging out with me, but he kind of made it intentional to keep hanging out with me and building into me and speaking truth into me, to make it so that I started to be like, oh yeah, you know what? I am kind of starting to believe this about myself. Or when I think about people who have built into me, have repeated his voice to me, I think about my old Sunday school teacher. Her name was Betsy. I just remember at the time, I'm sure she wasn't as old as I think, but I just remember she was really, really old. And every week she would give us candy if we were given the right answers. And so I knew the right answer was always Jesus. And so even though I did not want to be there, I just knew, yep, it's Jesus, or be like Jesus, or follow Jesus. And I kept getting so much candy. And let me tell you, despite how much I didn't want to be there, I just remember how much she loved me, how much she cared for me, that even on the days where I was probably, more pleasing to be around than others, that she still loved me regardless. Like, that's what I think of. I think of this guy named Jay Lee. He was like the worship leader of our youth group at the time when I was in high school. And he was crazy enough, even in my high school Nico era, when let me tell you, I had a mouth on me. And he was willing to go, you know what? I'm going to give you this mic, and I want you to start leading games on stage. I see something in you. No one else would do this for you, but I believe in you. Just don't say any bad words on the stage, right? And we're just going to go like, go for it, man. Like, saw something in me that nobody else saw. Or I think about like my parents just speaking words of encouragement into me over and over and over. I think about my middle school teacher who, when she caught me teaching, Miss Stansberry, said, you know what, Nico, you're better than this. Do better next time. Still gave me a 0, but spoke those words of truth into me first, right? So my question for you is, who are you intentionally shepherding? Not just by accident, but like, who are people that you could continually go out of your way? You know what? I'm going to shepherd them. I am going to help them hear God's voice about who they are and call out that best in them. Well, I want to end kind of just a little bit differently today. We've talked about a lot of different voices that I think that we can hear right now. And Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. But I think if we're honest, for all of us in this room, like his voice isn't always the loudest in our lives, right? Sheep wander, they graze, they keep their heads down, and nibble by nibble, they kind of slowly drift away from the shepherd until suddenly they look up and they realize they have no idea where they are. And I think most of the time, rarely do people wake up and go, you know what, today I'm going to destroy my life, right? Instead, it's normally like one compromise, one distraction, one hurt, maybe one unchecked habit, one voice listened to over another, until eventually we're just simply lost, right? So I don't want to rush past kind of this idea of what Jesus says about hearing his voice. My sheep hear my voice. I know them. So I want to just take a moment to be still. We're going to dim the lights. If you feel comfortable, you can totally close your eyes as we kind of do some reflection. You don't have to. I know for some people that's a nightmare. If you would, I would encourage you, like maybe just kind of put your phones down, maybe hide them, put them in your pocket if you need to. As I just kind of ask some questions to help us kind of just process this, to help us see those voices. So think back over your past week. What voice has been the loudest in your life? Not in your whole life, just this specific last week. What voice has been the loudest? Maybe it's that voice of fear that, man, what if everything falls apart? Maybe it's that voice of performance. God, you're only valuable if you accomplish more. Maybe it's that voice of approval. Man, I have to keep everyone happy. Maybe it's that voice of comparison. Everyone else has it figured out. I should be there now. I'm so far behind. Maybe it's that voice of shame. You'll never be enough. Maybe it's that voice of comfort, just telling you don't risk anything. Just play it safe. You don't need to try anything new. What is that voice for you? Don't judge it. Just know what it is. Now, set that voice aside for just a moment. And again, listen to the words of Jesus. I know my sheep. My sheep know my voice. I call them by name. I came that they may have life. Maybe the most important thing you need to hear this morning isn't another opinion. Maybe you just need to hear that before Jesus asks you to follow him, he wants you to know that he already knows you. He likes you. He knows you completely, your fears, your failures, your doubt, your story. And he still calls you by name. And if you've spent this week listening to that voice that says you're not enough, Jesus says, I know you. If you've been listening to that voice of shame, Jesus says, I call you by name. If you've been listening to that voice that says you've wandered too far away, Jesus says, I search for my sheep. And if you've been listening to that voice that says no one sees you, Jesus says, I laid down my life for you. Now I want you to take a moment and think of someone. Not someone famous, but someone that God has used in your life. Someone who has either really knows you now or really knew you at a certain point, walked beside you, didn't give up on you, helped you hear God's voice for yourself when you couldn't hear it. Maybe it was a parent or a grandparent or a teacher or a coach or a pastor or a friend, a spouse, a small group leader. Just take a moment and just thank God for that person's presence, that person's ability to help you experience and see God in those moments. one last question. Who is God inviting you to be a shepherd for? Not someone to rescue, not someone to fix, not to control, to shepherd. Someone who needs someone to know them, to encourage them, to walk beside them, to search for them, to protect them. Someone who maybe just needs to be reminded that they are loved. Maybe it's one of your kids. Maybe it's your spouse, a coworker, a neighbor, a student, a friend who's been going through something really hard. Who is that person? Who comes to mind? What do you need to do to reach out to them this week, to help them through that, to help shepherd them? This week, you'll hear dozens of voices. Some will tell you you're not enough. Some will tell you to chase after success. Some will tell you to protect yourself. But over all those voices is our good shepherd. The one who knows you, the one who loves you, the one who calls you by name and leads you towards life. As you learn to follow his voice, may someone else hear his voice through yours. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you. Thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for being a God that loves us, that don't just leave us to our own mess, our own lives, but you are a God that loves us so much. You are with us through all of it. That you love us and you call us to more. Thank you for being that kind of God. That when all these different voices call us for shallow, empty things, you call us to true, real life. And I pray that this week we would be people who would pay attention to the voices around us and listen for your voice and continue to just practice and get better at it day after day. Thank you so much, God. Hear me pray. Amen.